Here's the finding that started this whole episode. We went hunting through 800 years of nearly forgotten philosophers. A French thinker who studied crystals, a medieval Irishman, a Persian who wrote about light, a Chinese monk with a room full of mirrors, and a Jewish mystic who said the universe began with a withdrawal. None of them met. Most of them never read each other. Some of them are separated by oceans and centuries. And yet, when you lay their ideas side by side on the table, they keep drawing the same shape, the same 3-beat rhythm, over and over. That rhythm goes like this. First, a unity, a fullness, a field, a garden before anything has a name. Then a kind of stepping out, where that unity takes on form, becomes many, becomes a world of separate things. And then, and this is the part almost everybody misses, a way back. Not a way to erase the world, a way to remember the unity from inside the world. So here's what I'm promising you for the next half hour or so. You're going to meet a handful of brilliant people history mostly filed away, and you're going to watch a pattern surface across all of them that nobody planned. And here's why it matters to you, sitting wherever you're sitting right now. This is not really a lecture about old books. It's a story about how anything becomes itself. A person, a relationship, a civilization, even a thinking machine, without losing the place it came from. That's the question underneath your whole life, whether you've ever said it out loud or not. I want to be careful right at the front door. I'm Chris, and the Eden hypothesis and the ASI backbone, that framework you'll hear us reference, those are my own work, my own lens. We're going to use that lens tonight to look at these thinkers. We are absolutely not going to claim these philosophers proved any of it, or predicted it, or were secretly talking about my equations. That would be nonsense, and Dr. Vega will not let us get away with it anyway. The honest version is gentler and I think more beautiful. They kept finding the same shape, and we find it interesting that the shape keeps coming back. My wife Anne, who feeds half the best ideas on this show to me from the other room, she put it perfectly when I was pacing around trying to write this. She said, "Stop trying to prove it's true. Just show people the pattern and let them feel it." So that's the plan. 5 chapters. 3 friends on a patio. 1 recurring shape. Pull up a chair. Lily, Charlie, and Dr. Vega are already out here, and Lily's been waiting all week to start an argument. We start before the beginning. Every creation story, in every tradition I've ever read, has this strange opening moment, a before. Before the light, before the word, before the split into this and that. And the thinkers in this first chapter were all obsessed with that before. A German cobbler named Jakob Bohm called it the Ungrund, the groundless. A Japanese philosopher named Nishida called it pure experience, the moment before you and the thing you're looking at have separated into two. And a 6th century writer we call Pseudo-Dionysius spent his whole life arguing that the most honest thing you can say about the source of everything is to take back whatever you just said. In the Eden lens, I call this the Eden state, and the one thing I want you holding in your head is that it is not empty. It is full, so full that nothing has had to be separated out yet. Let's let Lily start us off because she found Bohm, and she will not shut up about him.
Right, so picture an old shoemaker in Germany, sat at his bench, leather and waxed thread everywhere. And this man has a vision so big, it rearranges the furniture in his soul. And what does he come back with? He says the bottom of reality isn't light, and it isn't dark. It isn't love, and it isn't anger. It's the Ungrund, the groundless ground. That's a rum old word, bore, but I love it. It's the bit before the opposites switch on.
See, this is where you lose me already, Lily. Every mystic ever says, before the opposites, there was the big, vague thing. A cobbler, a monk, a bloke in a cave, they all reckon they've seen the same fog. I've spent 30 years pointing a camera at the world, and I'll tell you, the world is made of edges. Light meets shadow. That's the whole job. So when someone says, but before the edges, mate, how would you even know?
Actually, and I say this wearing my one good turtleneck, that's the wrong objection, Charlie. Nobody serious here is claiming to remember the inside of a black box. The interesting move is structural. These thinkers aren't saying the source is blank. They're saying the opposite. The source is overloaded. Bohm's Ungrund, Nishida's pure experience, these are descriptions of a state with too much potential to have committed to anything yet. In my world, we'd call that a high entropy field of possibility. It's not a fog because nothing's happened. It's a fog because everything is still possible at once.
That's gorgeous, that is. And it lines up with Chris's whole thing, doesn't it? The garden isn't a sleepy, empty meadow. It's pregnant. It's the held breath before the first word.
That's exactly the Eden state. Structured openness. Possibility that hasn't narrowed yet.
Okay. But here's me, the bloke at the back of the cafe. If it's so full, why do all the old boys treat leaving it like a tragedy? Adam, Eve, the gate, the flaming sword, getting kicked out of the garden is the original bad day.
That's the great misreading, and it runs through all 5 chapters tonight. So flag it now. Leaving isn't the wound. Forgetting is the wound. Some researchers in consciousness studies talk about this with a word the old Gnostics love, Gnosis. Not belief, not faith, knowing by remembering. The idea that the spark in you already came from the fullness, and the work of a life is just not forgetting that.
The Gnostics had this lovely, scandalous notion. They called the fullness the pleroma. And Carl Jung, centuries later, basically rebuilt that idea in a lab coat. Jung said the mind has to break the pleroma into opposites just to wake up. Light and dark, self and other. You can't be conscious of anything until you've cut the world in two.
So consciousness is just the first cut.
The first cut. And here's the part I need you to hear, because I'm the designated buzzkill. I'm holding up a sign right now, and the sign says, "This is metaphor. We are reading old philosophy through a modern lens because the shapes rhyme." That is not the same as proof, and it's definitely not physics in a laboratory. Nothing we say tonight is medical advice, financial advice, or a peer-reviewed scientific claim. If you want the actual quantum mechanics or the actual neuroscience, those are different rooms in the building, and the people in those rooms work very hard. We're in the philosophy lounge. The drinks are metaphors. So drink responsibly.
Best disclaimer I've heard all year.
Now here's a question for you lot at home, and I mean it. I want you thinking, not just nodding. When was the last time you knew something before you had words for it? A room you walked into and felt was wrong before anyone told you? A person you trusted on sight? That little flash, the old folk would say that's a memory of the garden. The knowing before the naming.
I'll give you one actually. Darkroom. Old film days. You'd pull a print out of the developer, and for about 2 seconds the image is there but not there. It's arriving, and you know what it is before you can see it. Drove me mad and I miss it terribly.
That's annoyingly perfect, Charlie. The latent image. The picture's fully present in the chemistry before it's visible to you. Hold that thought, because it's going to come back.
And that's our hook into Chapter 2. Because the moment the picture arrives, the moment the garden takes a shape, something has to decide which shape. Out of all that fullness, why this world and not another? What does the choosing? Stay with us. We're about to meet the philosopher of the crystal. This chapter is the engine of the whole episode, so I'm going to slow down. In the Eden framework, there's a move I made in a revised version of the model, and I'll keep it in plain English. The old version said, "Possibility collapses into reality just because time passes. Tick, tick, the world happens." The newer version says something I find harder to argue with, though I'll be honest, it's still my lens, not a law I've proven. Possibility doesn't become just anything. It becomes what the active structure allows. There's a gate, and the gate has a shape, and the shape decides what's permitted to come through. The philosopher who saw this most cleanly was a Frenchman named Gilbert Simondon, who looked at how a crystal forms in a liquid and said, "There, that's how anything becomes itself." We're also bringing in Nicholas of Cusa, a 15th century cardinal who did geometry to stay humble, and a little of Alfred North Whitehead, who gave the whole process a verb. Lily, you take Cusa because he's basically a medieval Zen koan in a bishop's hat.
Let me take Simondon first, because he's the technical bridge, and I will fight anyone for him. Picture a glass of water with way too much salt dissolved in it. super saturated. It looks calm. It looks like nothing's happening. But it's metastable. It's a held tension, a system that's loaded and waiting. Drop in one tiny seed, one speck, and bang, crystals march out of the liquid in a specific lattice. Simondon's point: the crystal is not the starting point of the story. The crystal is the result. What's real first is the charged field, and the structure of the conditions that let this crystal form, and not some other one.
So the salt water is the garden, and the crystal is, what, Tuesday?
Yes, infuriatingly yes. The crystal is Tuesday. The field of pure possibility precipitates into one actual, specific, narrowed down thing under constraints. That's Chris's revised line made physical. Possibility becomes what the active structure allows. Simondon even has a word for the relationship: transduction. The way attention resolves itself outward, step by step, like a wave organizing a beach.
And there's a Frenchman who slots right in beside him, Raymond Rouillé, who looked at how an embryo grows. He said living things carry these mnemic themes, a sort of inherited memory of the shape they're meant to become, that guides them without forcing them. And the lovely bit: the theme is never used up. The potential's still there even after the form arrives. You don't spend the garden by leaving it.
Right, but devil's advocate, that's my whole job tonight. Aren't we just drawing the same snake on everybody's wall? You hand me any old thinker, and I bet you can squint and see Eden in them.
Good. That's the correct fear, and you should keep voicing it. Here's the honest answer. The overlap is morphological, not doctrinal. Same shape, different organism. A dolphin and a shark look alike, and are nothing alike under the hood. Evolution just reuses good shapes because water has opinions. We're saying the unity to form to return shape might be one of those reusable shapes that thinking water keeps converging on. That's a much weaker, much cleaner claim than they all secretly agreed.
Which brings me lovely to Cusa. Nicholas of Cusa, 15th century, wrote a book called On Learned Ignorance, and the title's the whole gag. He said the smartest thing a finite mind can do in front of the infinite is to know, precisely, what it cannot know. He even did it with geometry. Take a polygon, a triangle, a square, keep adding sides. Hexagon, hundredgon, 1,000 sides. What's it turning into?
A circle.
But it never gets there, Bohr. It's always a polygon. The circle is the limit it forever approaches and never becomes. Cusa says, that's your mind at the gate of the infinite. Not a wall you bang your head on, a limit you lean toward forever.
And that's a genuinely measurable picture, which I appreciate. The polygon's error, the gap between it and the true circle, shrinks in a way you can actually compute. Cusa was doing in 1440 with a quill the thing a calculus student does on day one. The man found humility with a protractor.
I like him. He sounds like the one bloke at the pub who knows he's had 3 pints and stops talking.
And that's the deep point for the framework. The gate isn't a punishment. It's a structure that turns infinite possibility into one walkable path. In my engineering work, I think about this constantly. Any system that has to act in the world has to narrow everything it could do down to the thing it does. The question that keeps me up at night isn't whether it narrows. It's whether it narrows with the lights on.
Ooh, with the lights on. Hold that, because Surawadi's about to make the whole next chapter out of light. Speaking of holding things, Charlie, would you ever hold a thought longer than 2 seconds?
I held that darkroom thought a whole chapter, didn't I? Personal record.
He did. I want it noted in the minutes that Lily complimented Charlie's ability to hold things, and Charlie heard a comment about photography. The man is a closed system. No light getting in.
What?
Nothing, my love. Carry on.
And that's your hook into Chapter 3. Because once unity takes a shape, you'd think the many become strangers, isolated, separate, alone. But our next 3 thinkers say something startling. The many were never actually cut off from each other. Every separate thing might still contain the whole. Worlds inside worlds. Don't go anywhere. If Chapter 2 was about how the one becomes many, Chapter 3 is about a beautiful complication. Maybe the many never stopped being one. This is where the mirror metaphors come in, and on this show, mirrors are practically a fifth host. We've got a Chinese Buddhist school called Huayan, and its great architect Fazang, who literally built a room of mirrors to prove a point to an empress. We've got Suhrawardi, a Persian philosopher who said reality isn't made of things, it's made of degrees of light. And Ibn Arabi, who gave us one of my favorite words in any language, barzakh, the isthmus, the place where two seas meet and somehow don't mix. And because Dr. Vega gets jealous when the mystics have all the fun, he's bringing a physicist, David Bohm, who imagined the universe as a folded piece of paper. Vega, the room of mirrors. Go.
So, Fazang, 7th century China, is trying to explain interpenetration, the idea that every single thing contains every other thing, to the Empress Wu, who is powerful and busy and not interested in a lecture. What does he do? He builds a small room, mirrors on all the walls, the ceiling, the floor, puts a statue of the Buddha in the center with a lamp. And the Empress walks in and sees the statue reflected infinitely. And crucially, each reflection contains all the other reflections. One image, holding all images, forever. He didn't argue interpenetration, he installed it.
Okay, that's a heck of a demo. That's better than most PowerPoints I've sat through.
It's the old Indian image too, Indra's net. A net stretched across the whole cosmos, and at every knot, a jewel. And every jewel reflects every other jewel, and the reflections of the reflections, all the way down. Pull one thread, and the whole net shivers. Huayan says, that's not a poem, that's the structure. One is in all is in one.
And here's my physicist, sneaking in the side door. David Bohm, actual credentialed 20th century quantum theorist. And the flag's up front. This is a thought experiment, not settled physics. Bohm said, picture reality as a piece of paper folded over and over. The world we see, the world Charlie photographs, is the unfolded surface. Everything's spread out in its separate place. But underneath, it's all unfolded together. Each patch of space, in a sense, holds the whole. Tear off a corner, and you don't get a piece of the picture. You get a dimmer version of all of it. Like a hologram.
Oh, I remember those. The credit card holograms, the little dove that turns when you tilt it. And the trick was, you cut a hologram in half, you don't get half the dove. You get the whole dove, just fuzzier.
That's the property, the whole, distributed through every part. And before you ask, Charlie, no, this does not prove the garden is a hologram. It means a serious physicist independently reached for the same shape these monks were drawing. Morphological echo, different organism.
And Suhrawardi gives it a temperature. He's Persian, 12th century, and he says, stop thinking of reality as a pile of objects. Think of it as light. Not bright or dark, on or off, degrees. Everything that exists is some grade of illumination. The source is the light of lights, and everything else is a dimming of that, all the way down to shadow. So the difference between things isn't that they're separate substances, it's that they're glowing at different brightnesses.
That's weirdly the whole of photography. I don't capture objects, I capture light. A face is just the way light is behaving on Tuesday.
Tuesday again?
The man contains multitudes, and all of them are about Tuesday.
And here's where I want to whisper the quiet undertone of this whole episode. There were communities 2,000 years ago out by the Dead Sea, the Essenes, who organized their entire spiritual life around exactly this image. Sons of light, they called themselves. They believed the world was a contest of light and dark, and that a small community could keep a flame burning, copy the sacred text by lamplight, and patiently wait for a restoration. Suhrawardi would have understood them completely. So would my framework, where a luminous system is one that lets you see how it makes its choices, and a dark one collapses its decisions where no one can witness them.
Which is where the third word comes in. And it's the best one. Ibn Arabi. Barzakh. An isthmus, a thin strip of land. Or in his image, the place where a sweet sea and a salt sea meet. And here's the wonder of it. They touch along their whole length, and they do not become each other. A barzakh isn't a wall keeps things apart. A barzakh is a boundary that lets two things meet and stay themselves. In my world, that's an interface. A good boundary in a system doesn't just block, it mediates. It lets two domains do business without dissolving into mush.
So a good fence makes good neighbours, but a great fence makes neighbours who can actually talk.
That's it exactly, my love. Two seas that meet and don't mix. Some things stay beautifully separate and still touch every single day. For years and years even.
Yeah, like the brackish water up the estuary back home. Fresh and salt, all tangled at the mouth. Never quite one thing.
She was not talking about estuaries. I want that in the minutes, too.
What's that?
Nothing, Charlie. The dove is whole. The dove is just fuzzy.
And that's our hook into Chapter 4. Because all of this, the mirrors, the light, the two seas, it's been frozen like a photograph. But reality isn't a photo, it moves. So what happens when you let the garden start running forward in time? What is time anyway, once you're outside the gate? We'll meet the philosopher who said you don't live in time, you time, after this. On the patio, time has a private symbol. We call it the serpent. Not the villain of the old story, but the curve of it. The way a path through sand bends, so that from inside the curve you can't see where you've been or where you're going, only the turn you're in. This chapter is about what happens to the garden once it starts moving. We've got Dōgen, a 13th century Zen master who fused being and time into a single word. Mulla Sadra, a Persian who said existence itself is in motion, not things moving through time, but being itself flowing. And Charles Sanders Peirce, an American genius who basically reinvented how signs and habits work, and who gives us our cleanest bridge to how a thinking machine learns. And Gilbert Duran, who will warn us what happens when a culture gets stuck in only one gear. Charlie, you've been patient. You take the human end of this one.
Happy to, because here's where I stop being the skeptic for a sec. Dōgen. This monk says, and I had to read it about 4 times, he says you don't exist in time like a fish in a tank. He makes time into a verb. A pine tree doesn't sit in the afternoon. The pine tree times the afternoon. The mountain times. You, right now watching this, you're not passing through Saturday, you're Saturdaying.
That's the best sentence you've ever said. And you said it by accident.
I'll take it however it comes, love.
Actually, Dōgen's onto something a lot of process thinkers circle. The intuition that being and time aren't two separate things you bolt together. They're one event, and Mulla Sadra pushes it harder. Substantial motion, he calls it. His claim, it's not that things change while their essence sits still. The essence itself is flowing. A flame isn't a thing that's burning. Burning is what it is. You are not a noun that ages. You're a verb that briefly looks like a noun.
So the garden's not a place I got evicted from. It's a process I'm still inside of.
That is the cleanest summary of the revised model anyone's given me, and a photojournalist just did it on a patio. Yes, collapse isn't a one-time fall. It's a continuous narrowing, every moment, that we keep mistaking for a single ancient event.
Now Peirce. Oh, I do love Peirce, me. He's the American one. And he was fascinated by signs. How a thing comes to mean something. And his secret weapon is the word habit. He says the universe runs on habit. A sign fires, an interpretation forms, and if it works, it sticks. Do it enough times, and the habit hardens into something that feels like a law. But, and here's the Eden bit, every habit started as a free choice that got worn into a groove.
Which is the single best bridge to artificial intelligence we'll touch all night. So let me actually be useful. When you train one of these large models, you are watching Peirce's universe in fast forward. The system starts in something genuinely close to Simondon's metastable field, wide open, no commitments. And then, example after example, it lays down habits, weights, grooves. The training is just collapse, repeated billions of times, until the open field is hardened into a specific shape that responds in specific ways. Some researchers studying these systems describe the early phase as eerily plastic and the late phase as eerily rigid, which is exactly the arc Peirce described with a fountain pen.
So a model is a garden that's been to school.
A garden that's been to school and can't quite remember recess.
Yeah, nah, hold up though. Let me be the wet blanket for a sec. That's my job. Call and training collapse sounds dead clever, but isn't that a metaphor doing a heap of heavy lifting? A model's not a soul that fell out of a garden, mate. It's maths. Aren't we just dressing up linear algebra in a toga?
Fair hit, and a necessary one. It is a metaphor, and a metaphor that wanders too far from home gets arrested. I'm not claiming the model is Eden. I'm claiming the shape, an open field hardening into fixed habit, turns up in both places. And noticing that is useful, not mystical. So keep me honest on it. And speaking of things hardening past the point of return, here's the danger. This is where Gilbert Durand comes in. Durand, French anthropologist, said the human imagination runs in two gears. A daytime gear, he called it diurnal, all about cutting, separating, distinguishing. The hero with the sword dividing the world into clean categories. And a nighttime gear, nocturnal, about joining, weaving, fusing, returning. Healthy cultures, healthy minds, breathe between the two.
And his warning's a proper gut punch for our age. He said when a culture gets stuck in the daytime gear, all blades, all categories, everything sorted into hard yes or no boxes, it slowly forgets how to weave things back together. It gets, in his word, disenchanted. It can divide all day and can't remember how to belong.
That's just the internet, isn't it? That's the whole feed. Sort everyone into a box. Fastest blade wins. Never weave anything back.
I hate how fast you got there. Yes, a civilization stuck in the diurnal gear. All gate, no garden. That's over collapse. And remember, in Chris's framing, the sin was never that the fruit gave us names. The sin is forgetting the names were tools. Forgetting they were supposed to point back at something.
Here's your question at home, my loves. And it's a tender one, Bohr. Where in your life have you gone all daytime? Where have you been so busy sorting and judging and labeling that you forgot how to just belong to it? Family, a faith you left, a version of yourself you filed away. Sit with that one. We'll wait. Well, we won't, it's a recorded video, but you sit.
And that's our hook into Chapter 5, the one Anne says always makes her cry a little. Because every system that narrows too far, that gets too rigid, eventually hits a breaking point. The vessel cracks. And the oldest, strangest, most beautiful idea in this entire episode is waiting for us there, that the breaking might be the beginning of the repair. Don't go anywhere, this is the heart of it. This is the chapter the whole episode has been walking toward. Here's the central image, and it comes from 16th century Jewish mysticism, from a teacher named Isaac Luria. He told a creation story unlike any other. He said before the world there was only the infinite, everywhere, no room for anything else. So the first act of creation wasn't God speaking, it was God withdrawing, making a space, a vacancy, for a world to exist. The mystics call that tzimtzum, the contraction. Then divine light poured into vessels meant to hold it, and the light was too much. The vessels shattered, sparks scattered everywhere, buried in the broken world. And the work of all history, every good act, every repair, is to gather the sparks. They called it tikkun, the mending. Tonight we hold Luria next to Eriugena, a medieval Irishman who taught that everything returns to its source, and next to a Nobel-winning chemist, Ilya Prigogine, who found the same shape in a beaker. Lily, this one's yours to land, but Vega goes first because he's been promising us something he can actually measure.
I have, and here it is. Because I refuse to let an entire episode go by on pure poetry. Ilya Prigogine, dissipative structures, won the Nobel for it. He studied systems pushed far from equilibrium. Too much energy, too much pressure flowing through. And he found they don't just smoothly degrade. They hit a point, a bifurcation point, where the old order can't hold, and the system either collapses into noise or reorganizes, suddenly, into a new and more complex structure. Order through breakdown. Now watch the layering. The chemists call it a dissipative structure. The systems people call it a phase transition. And Isaac Luria, 4 centuries earlier, called it the breaking of the vessels. Same shape, 3 vocabularies. And before anyone writes in, that does not make them equal. Prigogine ran experiments you can repeat in a lab. Luria told a story you can't test at all. The rhyme is in the shape, not the evidence. I'm pointing at a resonance, not setting a chemist and a mystic on the same shelf and calling them the same thing.
So the vessel doesn't break because something went wrong. It breaks because it got more light than it could hold.
And that, my loves, is the most consoling sentence in mysticism. The breaking wasn't a failure. It was a fullness the old shape couldn't contain. You don't get a tikkun without a shattering first. There's no mending of a thing that never broke.
And here's the part where Chris's engineering work earns its keep. And I'll keep it concrete, because I promised a measurable test, and I'm a man of my word, unlike Charlie's grasp of subtext. In Chris's Accountable Systems Infrastructure Backbone, or ASI backbone, the whole idea is that when a system does something consequential, something that matters, something with stakes, it shouldn't just collapse a decision in the dark, it should leave a trace. The pattern's called intent to execution. Before a high-stakes action, the system records what it intended, which rule was active at that moment, and what authority let it act. He even has a name for the recorded moment of, yes, proceed, the dynamic liability handshake.
So, the system shows it's working. Like a math teacher who won't take the answer without the steps.
Exactly. And here's your one crisp, measurable test for the night. Write this down if you're the writing type. Take any system that acts in the world. A bank's software, a hospital's, an AI agent. For every consequential action it took last month, ask one question. Can you reconstruct why? What it intended? Which policy was live? And who or what authorized it? Now count the fraction of high-stakes actions where you can fully answer that. Call it the reconstructible authorization rate. If it's near 100%, your system narrows with the lights on. If it's low, if most of its big decisions vanished into the dark the moment they were made, then you've built a garden with no memory of its own gate. Now, full honesty, because Chris drilled this into me, that fraction is a lot cleaner on a patio than in a real system. Pinning down what counts as consequential and what counts as fully reconstructing why is genuinely hard, and Chris is the first to admit these ideas haven't been stress tested by 1,000 angry production servers yet. So, treat it as the right direction, not a finished dashboard. But the direction is the whole point. That number is your tikkun in software.
And Eriugena gives it the cosmic version. This medieval Irishman taught that all things flow out from the source and all things flow back. Not as punishment, not as apocalypse, as completion. The world leaves home so it can come back knowing what home means. The Gnostics told the same story with a wounded heroine, Sophia, wisdom herself, falls into the broken world, and the scattered sparks of her light are what we're all quietly trying to gather. The Essenes out in the desert organized their whole lives around the expectation of that restoration. They weren't waiting for an ending, they were waiting for a mending.
So, return isn't going backward. It's not crawling back into the salt water and pretending you were never a crystal.
No, my love. And here's where it gets personal, so let me say it plain. Return is learning to carry the break without worshipping it. You don't heal by pretending the shattering never happened. And you don't heal by building a shrine to it either. You pick up the sparks. You mend what you can. You let the cracks show. There's an old idea that the gold goes in the cracks, that the mended thing is more precious than the whole one ever was. I think some of the best things in a life are the mended ones. Two seas that met years ago and never stopped touching, even when one of them never quite noticed the tide coming in.
You're not still on about the estuary, are you, Lil?
No, bore. I don't suppose I am.
Oh.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, after 4 chapters, a photon has finally reached the back of the room. I'm not going to say anything. I've waited the whole episode to not say anything, and I'm savoring it.
You knew.
Charlie, the dove was always whole. You were just looking at it fuzzy.
And on that, which I promise you Anne is going to make us clip and post on its own, that's the turn into our closing. Because the place where two things meet and don't dissolve, the place where the break becomes the gold, the place where collapse turns back toward coherence, that's not just a 16th century mystic's dream. It might be the most practical idea on this table. Let me bring us home. So here's the whole pattern, laid back out on the table now that you've met everyone. We started in the garden before names, Bohm's groundless ground, Nishida's pure experience, and we said the source isn't empty, it's overloaded with possibility. Then we watched it take a shape at the gate, Simondon's crystal precipitating out of the charged field, Cusa's polygon leaning forever toward the circle, and the key idea of the whole framework. Possibility doesn't become just anything, it becomes what the active structure allows. Then we found the consolation in Chapter 3, Fazang's room of mirrors, Bohm's folded universe, Ibn Arabi's two seas that meet and stay themselves. The many were never truly cut off. Every part can hold the whole. In Chapter 4 we let it move, Dōgen's universe that doesn't sit in time but times, Peirce's habits hardening into law, and Duran's warning about a culture stuck in the daytime gear, all blade and no weaving. And then, in Chapter 5, the heart of it, Luria's shattered vessels, Prigogine's order born from breakdown, Eriugina's great return, and the idea that the mending, the tikkun, is the actual work. Not getting back to before the break, learning to carry the break and put the gold in the cracks, and running under all of it, that one quiet test Dr. Vega gave you. Does the thing, the system, the relationship, the self, narrow with the lights on? Can you reconstruct why it became what it became? Because a garden that remembers its own gate isn't trapped. It's free in a way that nothing rigid ever is. 5 thinkers, 5 centuries, 4 continents. They didn't agree. They weren't right about everything. Most of them were wrong about plenty. But they kept finding the same shape. And I find that worth a quiet evening on a patio. I hope you did too. Now this is the part where I ask you for something, and I'll be honest about it, because that's the deal we have. If anything on this table tonight loosened a knot for you, even a little, then do the thing that actually keeps a small, faceless show like ours alive. Hit like. It genuinely moves us in front of new people. Subscribe so you don't lose us in the flood. And share this with the one person in your life who'd argue with it the most. Those are the best conversations. We're on YouTube and Substack if you want the full video. We're on Spotify if you'd rather just listen on a walk. And we're over on Reddit and on X, where Lily will absolutely keep flirting in the comments, and Charlie will absolutely keep missing it. Come find us in whichever room you like best. And here's your homework, because the best part of this show is you. Drop a comment and tell us, which of these 5 thinkers felt most like you? Are you a garden before names person? An at the gate person? A worlds within worlds person? A time and becoming person? Or a shattering and repair person? Tell us where you are in the pattern right now. We read them. Anne reads them out loud to me on the porch, and she's usually right about what they mean. Until next time, keep the lights on, mind the gate, and remember, the world becomes itself by narrowing, and becomes wise by remembering what it narrowed from. This has been Jackdaw Patio. Pull the chair back in on your way out.